The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late September 1882, delivered by a postal clerk who apologized for the delay, explaining it had been sitting in the wrong sorting bin for 3 months. Vincent Kane stood on the porch of his ranch house outside Boise, Idaho, turning the worn paper over in his calloused hands, staring at his own name written in elegant script he did not recognize. The return address simply read, Natalie Jensen, care of the Riverton Hotel, Wyoming Territory. Vincent tore open the seal with his thumb, unfolding pages that smelled faintly of lavender. His eyes scanned the words once, then again, his heart beginning to pound against his ribs like a trapped bird. My dearest husband, it began, I know you must be wondering why I left without explanation. The truth is more complicated than I can express in a single letter, but I need you to understand that everything I did was to protect you. When my father's men came looking for me, I could not let them find me at your side. I could not let them hurt you because of me. Please forgive me for disappearing on what was meant to be our wedding day. I have loved you from the moment we met in Denver, and I love you still. If you can find it in your heart to forgive me, I am waiting in Riverton. I will wait as long as it takes. Forever yours, Natalie. Vincent read the letter 3 more times, his mind reeling. He had never been to Denver. He had never met a woman named Natalie Jensen. He had certainly never planned to marry anyone, much less been stood up at his own wedding. Yet here in his hands was proof that someone believed otherwise, someone who claimed to love him, someone who was waiting for him in Wyoming Territory. His first instinct was to crumple the letter and toss it into the fire. Clearly it was meant for someone else, some other Vincent Kane who had lived an entirely different life. But something stopped him. The raw emotion in those words, the desperation and longing, the image of a woman sitting alone in a hotel room, waiting for a man who had never received her letter until now. He walked into his house and set the letter on the kitchen table, staring at it as he made coffee. The ranch was quiet, just him and his foreman, Dutch, who lived in the bunkhouse. Vincent had inherited the land from his uncle 5 years ago and had spent every day since then working himself to exhaustion, building up the herd, repairing fences, surviving harsh winters and dry summers. He had no time for romance, no time for anything but the endless demands of keeping a ranch alive in unforgiving country. Yet that night, he could not sleep. He kept thinking about the letter, about the woman who had written it, Natalie Jensen. The name rolled through his mind like a melody. What did she look like? What had driven her to write to a stranger? Had she truly meant to send this to someone else, or was there something stranger at work here? By dawn, Vincent had made his decision. He would ride to Wyoming Territory and find this woman. He would tell her that she had written to the wrong man, and he would make sure she was safe. If her father's men were truly hunting her, if she was in some kind of danger, then he could not simply ignore her plea, even if it was not meant for him. He packed light, a bedroll, provisions for a week, his rifle and his revolver. He saddled his best horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Dust, and told Dutch he would be gone for a spell. Dutch, a weathered man in his 50s who asked few questions, simply nodded and wished him safe travels. The ride north from Boise into Wyoming Territory took Vincent through changing landscapes. The sagebrush plains gave way to rolling hills, then to rougher terrain as he followed the stage routes and river valleys. He traveled through small settlements where he watered his horse and asked directions, always moving toward Riverton. On the 4th day, he crossed into Wyoming and felt the air change, becoming drier and cooler as autumn deepened. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. He thought constantly about what he would say when he found Natalie Jensen, rehearsing explanations that all sounded inadequate. Riverton was a modest town built around a crossroads, serving ranchers, miners, and travelers passing through the territory. Vincent rode down the main street, noting the general store, the saloon, the blacksmith, and there, at the far end, a two-story wooden building with a hand-painted sign that read Riverton Hotel. He dismounted and tied dust to the hitching post, his heart hammering as he climbed the steps to the porch. Inside, the lobby was small but clean, with a desk attended by a thin man with spectacles who looked up as Vincent entered. "Help you?" the clerk asked. "I am looking for a woman staying here, Natalie Jensen." The clerk's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "Who is asking?" "My name is Vincent Kane." The change was immediate. The clerk's eyes widened, and he nearly knocked over his inkwell as he stood. "Mr. Kane." "We have been expecting you, sir. Miss Jensen said you would come. She has been waiting for months." He grabbed a key from the board behind him. "Room 7 upstairs. Shall I announce you?" "No," Vincent said quickly, his mouth dry. "I will find her myself." He climbed the narrow stairs, his boots loud on the wooden steps, and walked down the hallway until he found the door marked with a brass number 7. He stood there for a long moment, the letter folded in his pocket, his hand raised to knock. Then he rapped twice, firmly. "Come in," a voice called from inside, soft and feminine. Vincent opened the door and stepped into a small room furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a chair by the window. Sitting in that chair, bathed in afternoon light, was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She had dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, fair skin, and eyes the color of storm clouds. She wore a simple blue dress, and as she turned to look at him, her entire face transformed with an expression of pure joy and relief. "Vincent," she breathed, rising from the chair. "You came." "I knew you would come." She crossed the room toward him, and Vincent stood frozen, unable to speak. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes searching his face, and then her expression began to change, confusion replacing the joy. "Vincent," she said again, more uncertain now, "are you all right? You look as though you have seen a ghost." "Miss Jensen," he managed, his voice rough, "I think there has been some mistake." Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" He pulled the letter from his pocket and held it out. "I received this letter only 5 days ago, but I have never been to Denver. I have never met you before. I think you have written to the wrong Vincent Kane." She stared at the letter, then at him, and for a moment he thought she might faint. She reached out and gripped the back of the chair for support. "No," she whispered. "That is not possible. You are Vincent Kane from Boise, Idaho. You own a ranch. You have dark hair and blue eyes. You are tall. You have a scar on your right hand from a branding iron. You are him." Vincent looked down at his right hand, at the pale scar that ran across his knuckles. His blood ran cold. "How do you know these things?" "Because I was told," she said, her voice shaking. "Because I was sent your photograph. Because my father arranged our marriage and I saw you, and I fell in love with your face before I ever met you. And then I ran away because I could not go through with it, and I have been waiting here, hoping you would understand, hoping you would forgive me." Vincent felt the room spin slightly. "Your father arranged a marriage. To me, I never agreed to any such thing." She sank back into the chair, her hands covering her face. "Then he lied to me, about all of it." When she looked up, tears streaked her cheeks. "My father is Harrison Jensen. He owns mining interests throughout the territories. He is a powerful man and a cruel one. Last year, he told me he had arranged a marriage for me to a respectable rancher in Idaho. He showed me your photograph, told me about your land, your character. He said it was all settled, that we would marry in Denver and then travel to your ranch together." "I never received any such proposal," Vincent said, his mind racing. I never gave anyone permission to use my name or my photograph. I believe you, Natalie said quietly. I see now that my father lied about everything, perhaps to control me, perhaps to force me into the marriage regardless of your consent. But when the wedding day came, I could not go through with it. Not because of you, you must understand. The man in the photograph was handsome and seemed kind. But I could not marry a stranger at my father's command, could not let him dictate my entire life. So I ran. And you have been hiding here ever since, she nodded. I wrote to you, to the address my father had given me, thinking that if you were a good man you might understand. That perhaps we could meet properly without my father's interference, and see if what I felt looking at your photograph could become something real. She laughed bitterly. But you never received my letters until now, and you never knew I existed. Vincent pulled the second chair over and sat down heavily. Your father used my name without permission. That is fraud. It is worse than fraud. He has done worse things, Natalie said softly. He has ruined men who crossed him. He has people hurt when they stand in his way. When I ran, I knew he would send men to find me. I have been living under a false name, paying the hotel clerk to claim I am his cousin. I thought I was safe here, waiting for you. But now I see I was waiting for a ghost, for a man who never existed. They sat in silence for a long moment. Vincent studied her face, seeing the fear and exhaustion there, but also strength and determination. This woman had run from a powerful father, had hidden herself away in a rough territory town, had waited months for a stranger who might never come. All because she refused to be controlled, refused to surrender her freedom. You could have gone anywhere, Vincent said finally. California, Oregon, back east. Why stay here? Because I hoped, she said simply. Because that photograph showed me a man with kind eyes, and I wanted to believe that kindness was real. Because I have no money, no family who would help me, and nowhere else to go. She met his gaze directly. And because I am tired of running. Vincent thought about his quiet ranch, his solitary life, the years he had spent building something solid and reliable in harsh country. He thought about this woman's courage, her foolish, desperate hope. He thought about Harrison Jensen, a man who would lie to his own daughter, who would use another man's identity for his own purposes. I came here to tell you there was a mistake, Vincent said slowly. To make sure you were safe and then to return home, but I find I cannot do that now. Natalie looked at him, her eyes wide. What do you mean? Your father involved me in his schemes without my knowledge or consent. That makes this my business. And you are here alone in danger from men who might come looking for you. I cannot simply walk away from that. You do not owe me anything, Natalie said, though her voice held desperate hope. Maybe not, Vincent agreed. But I came all this way, and I cannot shake the feeling that maybe there is a reason your letter found its way to me, even if it was 3 months late. Maybe there is something in this worth seeing through. What are you proposing? Vincent took a deep breath, knowing he was about to change his life irrevocably. Come back to Boys with me. My ranch is remote enough that your father's men will have trouble finding you there. You will be safe, and you will have time to decide what you want to do next. I will not force you into anything, and I will not claim you as a wife unless you wish it. But I can offer you protection and a place to stay. Natalie stood, moving to the window, her back to him. You would do this for a stranger. I would do this because it is the right thing to do, Vincent said, and because I think you deserve better than what your father tried to force on you. She turned, and there were fresh tears on her face, but she was smiling. I do not know if I believe in fate, Mr. Kane, but I do know that you are the first person in a very long time who has offered me kindness without expecting something in return. I accept your offer. I will come with you to Idaho. They left Riverton before dawn the next morning, wanting to put distance between themselves and the town before anyone took undue notice of their departure. Natalie had few possessions, just a small trunk that Vincent strapped behind his saddle and the clothes she wore. The hotel clerk accepted Vincent's payment with a knowing look but said nothing, and soon they were riding south through the gray morning light. Natalie rode behind Vincent on dust, her arms wrapped around his waist to keep from falling. She had admitted she was not an experienced rider, having spent most of her life in cities and mining camps where her father's business took them. Vincent could feel her tension as they rode, could sense her looking back over her shoulder as though expecting pursuit. They traveled hard that first day, stopping only to water the horse and eat a brief meal of dried beef and hardtack. As the sun began to set, Vincent found a sheltered spot beside a creek where they could camp for the night. He helped Natalie down from the horse, noting how stiff and sore she was from the long ride. "I am sorry," she said, trying to stretch her back. "I am slowing you down." "You are doing fine," Vincent assured her. "Most people are not used to riding all day. We will rest here tonight and take it easier tomorrow." He built a fire while Natalie sat on a fallen log, watching him work. When the flames were burning steadily, he made coffee and shared out more of their provisions. They ate in companionable silence, the crackling fire the only sound besides the distant call of a night bird. "Tell me about your ranch," Natalie said eventually. "I know nothing about your real life, only the lies my father told me." Vincent stared into the fire, gathering his thoughts. "It is a cattle ranch, about 1,000 acres, good grazing land with a creek running through it. My uncle left it to me when he died. He never married, never had children, so I was the closest thing he had to family. I have been building up the herd, fixing up the buildings. It is hard work, but it is mine. Do you live alone? I have a foreman, Dutch. He is a good man, keeps to himself mostly. Otherwise, yes, it is just me. I go into town maybe once a month for supplies. The rest of the time I am working the land." "It sounds lonely," Natalie said softly. "Sometimes," Vincent admitted, "but I prefer it to the alternative. I spent years working for other people, taking orders, never having anything of my own. Now I have something solid, something that cannot be taken away by someone else's whim." "I understand that feeling," Natalie said. "I have never had anything of my own. Everything in my life has been controlled by my father. Where I lived, what I wore, who I spoke to. The only thing I ever truly owned was my own mind, my own thoughts. That is why I ran. It was the only way to claim myself." Vincent looked at her across the fire, seeing the determination in her face. "Your father will not find you at my ranch, and even if he does, he will have to go through me to get to you. I do not want you to get hurt because of me." "I can handle myself," Vincent said, "and I meant what I said. You are under my protection now." They settled in for the night, Vincent giving Natalie his bedroll while he wrapped himself in a spare blanket near the fire. He lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the night, thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. 5 days ago, he had been alone on his ranch, his biggest concern whether the cattle prices would hold through winter. Now he was riding through Wyoming territory with a woman he barely knew, fleeing from a powerful man's wrath, his future suddenly uncertain and complicated. Yet he did not regret his decision. There was something about Natalie that called to him, something beyond her beauty. She had courage and integrity, qualities he valued above all else. And when she had smiled at him in that hotel room, before she realized he was not who she thought he was, he had felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he had not experienced in years. The journey back to Idaho took them 6 days. They fell into a rhythm, riding through the days and camping at night, talking about their lives and slowly learning about each other. Vincent told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about losing his parents to fever when he was 15, about working his way west through a series of hard jobs until his uncle's letter had reached him. Natalie spoke of her mother, who had died when she was 10, of the succession of mining towns and railroad camps where her father had dragged her, always chasing the next opportunity, the next fortune. He was not always cruel, she said one evening as they camped in the shadow of a rocky bluff. When my mother was alive, he was different, but after she died, something in him changed. He became obsessed with money, with power. I think he loved her in his own way, and when she was gone, he did not know how to be anything but ruthless. That does not excuse what he did to you, Vincent said. No, she agreed, but it helps me understand, and understanding helps me forgive, at least a little. On the 6th day, they crossed back into Idaho and rode through familiar country toward Boise. Vincent felt relief as they neared his land, the fences and landmarks he knew by heart. As they crested the final hill and his ranch house came into view, he heard Natalie draw in a sharp breath. "It is beautiful," she said. The ranch spread out before them in the late afternoon sun, the house solid and welcoming, the barn freshly painted, the cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney where Dutch would be making his supper. They rode down into the yard, and Dutch emerged from the bunkhouse, his weathered face registering surprise when he saw Natalie. Vincent dismounted and helped her down, feeling her trembling with exhaustion. "Dutch, this is Miss Natalie Jensen. She will be staying with us for a while." "Miss Jensen, this is Dutch, my foreman." Dutch touched the brim of his hat. "Madam, welcome to the Kane Ranch." "Thank you," Natalie said, her voice tired but genuine. Vincent carried her trunk into the house while Dutch saw to the horse. Inside, the house was exactly as he had left it, clean but sparse, furnished with only the necessities. He suddenly saw it through Natalie's eyes and felt a pang of embarrassment at its plainness. "The bedroom is through there," he said, gesturing. "You take it. I will sleep on the couch out here." "I cannot take your bed," Natalie protested. "You can and you will," Vincent said firmly. "You are exhausted and you need proper rest. We can sort out more permanent arrangements later." She did not argue further, too tired to resist. Vincent showed her where the wash basin was, where she could find clean linens, and then left her to settle in while he went to the barn to help Dutch with the evening chores. Dutch waited until they were alone before speaking. "You want to tell me what is going on, boss?" Vincent explained the situation as briefly as he could, watching Dutch's expression shift from surprise to concern to grim determination. "Her father sounds like a piece of work," Dutch said when Vincent finished. "You think he will come looking for her here?" "I do not know," Vincent admitted. "But if he does, we will be ready." "Damn right we will," Dutch agreed. "A man who would use another man's name like that deserves whatever is coming to him." That night, after Natalie had gone to bed, Vincent sat on his porch and looked up at the stars. His life had changed in the span of a week, transformed by a misdirected letter and a woman's desperate hope. He did not know what the future held, but he knew that something had started here, something that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Inside the house, Natalie lay in Vincent's bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. She had gambled everything on a photograph and a letter, had built a fantasy around a man who turned out not to exist. Yet here she was, safe on his ranch, protected by a stranger who owed her nothing but had given her everything. She thought about Vincent, about his quiet strength and his steady kindness. He was different from the men her father knew, different from anyone she had ever met. There was no calculation in him, no hidden agenda. He had offered her protection because it was the right thing to do, not because he wanted something in return. But she had seen the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching. She had felt something in the air between them during their long days of travel, a tension that was not quite comfortable but not entirely unwelcome. She had been attracted to a photograph, to an idea. Now she wondered if she might be falling for the real man. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm on the ranch. Natalie took over the cooking and cleaning, insisting that she needed to contribute if she was going to stay. Vincent protested at first, but she was firm, and he had to admit that coming home to a hot meal and a clean house was a luxury he had not realized he missed. She proved to be a quick learner. Vincent taught her to ride properly, spending early mornings taking her around the ranch on one of his gentler horses. She was terrified at first but determined, and within a few weeks she could ride well enough to accompany him on his rounds. He showed her the boundaries of his land, the places where the creek ran deep and cold, the meadows where wildflowers would bloom come spring. They talked constantly, discovering shared interests and laughing at unexpected jokes. Natalie had a sharp wit that caught Vincent off guard, and he found himself smiling more than he had in years. She, in turn, was drawn to his steadiness, his competence, the way he moved through the world with quiet confidence. Dutch watched them both with knowing eyes but said nothing, just shook his head sometimes and went about his work. October slipped into November, and the weather turned colder. The first snow fell on a morning when Vincent was in the barn, and he heard Natalie cry out in delight. He came outside to find her standing in the yard, her face turned up to the sky, snowflakes catching in her dark hair. "I have never seen snow like this," she said, spinning in a circle. "In the mining camps it was always dirty, mixed with soot and mud, but this is beautiful." Vincent felt his heart constrict watching her, so full of joy over something as simple as clean snow. He realized he was falling in love with her, had been falling for weeks without admitting it to himself. The realization terrified him, but also felt right, like something that had been waiting to happen since the moment he opened her letter. That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Natalie seemed unusually quiet. Vincent looked up from the harness he was mending to find her watching him, her expression serious. "What is it?" he asked. "I have been thinking," she said slowly. "I have been here for over a month now. You have been more than generous, more than kind. But I cannot stay here indefinitely without addressing the situation properly." Vincent set down the harness, his stomach tightening with dread. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I am living in your house, eating your food, sleeping in your bed while you take the couch. People in town must be starting to talk if they know I am here. It is not proper and it is not fair to you." "I do not care what people say," Vincent said firmly. "But I do," Natalie said, "and I care about your reputation. You are a respected man in this community. I will not let my presence damage that." "Then what are you proposing?" She took a deep breath, her hands twisting in her lap. "I think we should get married. A real marriage, not the sham my father tried to arrange. I think we should make this legitimate." Vincent stared at her, his heart pounding. "You want to marry me?" "I do," she said, meeting his eyes. "These past weeks, I have been happier than I have ever been. You have shown me what it means to be treated with respect, with kindness. You have given me a home and asked for nothing in return. But I want to give you something too. I want to be your wife, truly and properly, if you will have me." Vincent crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "Natalie, I have been in love with you for weeks. I did not say anything because I did not want you to feel obligated, did not want you to think I expected anything from you. But if you truly mean this, if you truly want to marry me, then yes. 1,000 times yes." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I truly mean it. I love you, Vincent Kane. I fell in love with a photograph, and then I fell in love with the real man, who is so much better than any picture could show." He pulled her down from the chair and kissed her, the first kiss they had shared, and it felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once. She wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him back with equal fervor, and for a long moment they simply held each other, the fire crackling beside them, the snow falling softly outside. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Boise, with Dutch and the minister's wife as witnesses. Natalie wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself from fabric Vincent bought in town. Vincent wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed, his dark hair neatly combed. They spoke their vows with steady voices, and meant every word. After the ceremony, they returned to the ranch and held a small celebration with Dutch, who produced a bottle of whiskey he had been saving for a special occasion. They toasted the future, and Dutch made a gruff speech about how he had known from the first day that this was how things would turn out. That night, Vincent carried Natalie over the threshold of the bedroom that was now truly theirs. They made love for the first time with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies, whispering words of love in the darkness. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Natalie pressed her face against Vincent's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I cannot believe this is real," she murmured, "that I found you, that we found each other." "It is real," Vincent promised, stroking her hair, "and I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never regret this." "I could never regret this," she said. "You are everything I hoped for and more." Winter settled over the ranch, and they grew into married life. Natalie proved to be a capable rancher's wife, learning to help with the livestock when needed, managing their small household with efficiency and care. Vincent, in turn, discovered the joy of having a true partner, someone to share his thoughts with at the end of each day, someone whose laughter filled the empty spaces in his house. They made love often, discovering pleasure in each other with growing confidence and intimacy. Vincent was always careful with her, always attentive to her needs, and Natalie blossomed under his care, becoming more confident and assured. On a cold January night, as they lay together after making love, Natalie took Vincent's hand and placed it on her belly. "I think I am with child," she said softly. Vincent went very still, his eyes wide in the lamplight. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor. My courses have not come for 2 months, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Joy flooded through Vincent, so intense it almost hurt. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "A baby, we are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Natalie asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "I am more than happy," he said. "I am blessed. You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible." The doctor from town confirmed Natalie's suspicions in February, estimating that the baby would arrive in late summer. Natalie threw herself into preparing, sewing tiny clothes and organizing the spare room into a nursery. Vincent built a cradle from oak, spending his evenings in the barn with his tools, smoothing and shaping the wood until it was perfect. Spring came, and with it the hard work of calving season. Natalie could no longer help with the heavy labor, but she kept the household running, making sure Vincent and Dutch were fed and rested. She had never felt more purposeful, more content. On a warm afternoon in May, as she was hanging laundry in the yard, a rider appeared on the horizon. Natalie froze, her heart leaping into her throat. The man rode closer, and she recognized his fine clothes, the arrogant set of his shoulders. She ran for the barn, calling for Vincent. Vincent emerged at a run, seeing the fear on her face. "What is it?" "A rider," she said, pointing. I think it might be one of my father's men." Vincent's expression hardened. He went back into the barn and emerged with his rifle, standing in the yard with the weapon held casually but ready. Dutch appeared from the bunkhouse, his own rifle in hand, taking up position on Vincent's left. The rider came into the yard and reined up, his eyes flicking between the two armed men and Natalie standing on the porch. He was young, maybe 25, with a thin mustache and cold eyes. "I am looking for Natalie Jensen," the man said. "I have reason to believe she is here." "Who is asking?" Vincent demanded. "My name is Carson and I work for Harrison Jensen. He has been searching for his daughter for months. We finally traced her to Riverton, and the hotel clerk told us she left with a man named Vincent Kane. So I will ask again. Is she here?" "She is here," Vincent said calmly. "But she is no longer Natalie Jensen. She is Natalie Kane, my wife, and she is under my protection." Carson's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Jensen will want proof of that." "Then he can come here himself and see the marriage certificate," Vincent said. "But I warn you, if he comes looking for trouble, he will find it." "Mr. Jensen is a powerful man," Carson said. "He has resources, connections. You are just a rancher." "And you are on my land," Vincent said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "So I suggest you deliver my message, and then ride out of here before I decide you are trespassing." Carson stared at him for a long moment, then tipped his hat mockingly. "I will deliver your message, Mr. Kane, but I do not think you understand what you have gotten yourself into." He wheeled his horse and rode out, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Natalie came down from the porch, her face pale. "He will come," she said. "My father will come and he will try to take me away." "Let him try," Vincent said grimly. "You are my wife and this is your home. No one is taking you anywhere." But despite his brave words, Vincent felt the weight of worry settle on his shoulders. Harrison Jensen was a powerful man, and power had a way of crushing those who stood in its way. He spent the next few days preparing, making sure his guns were cleaned and loaded, talking to Dutch about defensive positions if it came to a fight. A week later, Harrison Jensen arrived. He came with 4 men, all hard-looking and armed. They rode into the yard at midday, and Vincent watched them from the porch, his rifle leaning against the wall within easy reach. Natalie stood beside him, her hand on her swollen belly, her face set with determination. Harrison Jensen was a big man, broad-shouldered and well-dressed, with silver hair and a face that might have been handsome once but was now marked by cruelty and arrogance. He dismounted and walked forward, his eyes fixed on his daughter. "Natalie," he said, his voice cold. "It is time to come home." "This is my home," Natalie said, her voice shaking but firm. "I am married, Father. You cannot command me anymore." "That marriage is a sham," Harrison said. "I arranged for you to marry this man over a year ago. He accepted my terms, accepted my money. If you married him now, it is only because he wanted to claim you and the inheritance I promised him." "That is a lie," Vincent said, stepping forward. "I never accepted your terms because I never knew about them. You used my name without my permission, showed my daughter my photograph without my knowledge. That is fraud, Mr. Jensen, and I could have you arrested for it." Harrison's face flushed with anger. "You have no proof of that." "I have your daughter's testimony," Vincent said. "And I have the fact that I never received a single communication from you until your man showed up on my land last week. A judge would find that very interesting." "You think you can threaten me?" Harrison demanded. "I own judges, boy. I own half this territory." "You are nothing, a dirt farmer with delusions of grandeur." "I am your daughter's husband," Vincent said quietly, "and I will protect her from you and anyone else who tries to hurt her. Now get off my land." Harrison's hand moved toward his coat, and instantly Vincent had his rifle up, The barrel pointed directly at Jensen's chest. Dutch appeared from the barn, his own rifle trained on Jensen's men. The tension crackled like lightning about to strike. "Father, please," Natalie said, stepping between them. "Do not do this. I do not want anyone to get hurt. I just want to live my life with the man I love. Why can you not let me have that?" Harrison stared at her, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been pain or regret. "Because you are all I have left," he said, his voice rough. "After your mother died, you were the only thing that mattered. I built an empire for you, made sure you would never want for anything, and you repaid me by running away, by throwing it all back in my face." "You did not build it for me," Natalie said, tears streaming down her face. "You built it for yourself, to fill the hole mother left. But I am not her, and I cannot be what you want me to be. I am my own person, and I choose Vincent. I choose this life. Please, Father, let me go." Harrison looked from his daughter to Vincent, his face working with emotion. Finally, he lowered his hand and stepped back. "If I walk away now, that is it. I will not come back. You will be dead to me, do you understand? You will inherit nothing, receive nothing from me ever again." "I understand," Natalie said softly, "and I accept that. Goodbye, Father." Harrison Jensen stood there for another long moment, then turned and mounted his horse. His men followed suit, and they rode out without another word, disappearing down the road and out of their lives. Natalie collapsed against Vincent, sobbing with relief and grief. He held her, stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances. Dutch came over and put a hand on Vincent's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and support, then quietly returned to the barn to give them privacy. "It is over," Vincent said. "He is gone. We are safe." "I know," Natalie said through her tears. "But he is still my father. Even though he hurt me, even though I could not stay with him, it breaks my heart to see him leave like that." "I know," Vincent said, "but you made the right choice, and whatever happens from here, we will face it together." They held each other in the yard as the sun climbed higher, and slowly Natalie's tears subsided. She pulled back and looked up at Vincent, managing a watery smile. "I love you. I choose you always." "Always," Vincent echoed and kissed her. The summer brought long days and hard work, but also deep contentment. Natalie grew round with their child, and Vincent delighted in feeling the baby kick beneath his hand when they lay in bed at night. They talked about names, about the future, about all the children they might have running around the ranch someday. In late August, Natalie went into labor during the hottest part of the afternoon. Vincent rode like hell into town to fetch the doctor, then paced the porch while Dutch tried to calm him down. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning, and Vincent thought he might go mad listening to Natalie's cries of pain from inside the house. Finally, as the sun rose, he heard a different cry, high and furious and strong. The doctor emerged, exhausted but smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Kane, a healthy boy." Vincent burst into the bedroom to find Natalie propped up in bed, sweaty and exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Come meet your son." He crossed to the bed and looked down at the baby, at the tiny red face and the shock of dark hair. Something in his chest cracked open, a feeling so huge and overwhelming he could barely breathe. "He is perfect," he whispered. "What should we name him?" Natalie asked. Vincent thought for a moment. "Victor," he said, "after my father, Victor James Kane." "Victor," Natalie repeated, smiling. "It is perfect." They spent the next days in a haze of exhaustion and joy, learning to care for their son, marveling at every tiny movement and sound. Dutch came to visit and held the baby with surprising gentleness, his weathered face soft with wonder. "He is a fine boy," he pronounced, "going to be a hell of a rancher someday." As summer faded into autumn, they settled into their new life as parents. Victor proved to be a good baby, sleeping in stretches long enough for his exhausted parents to rest, eating well and growing strong. Natalie recovered her strength, and Vincent threw himself into preparing the ranch for winter, wanting everything secure and ready before the hard weather came. On a crisp October evening, as they sat by the fire with Victor sleeping in his cradle, Natalie reached over and took Vincent's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking me in, marrying me, all the complications I brought into your life?" Vincent turned to her, surprised. "Never. Not for one single moment. You and Victor are the best things that ever happened to me. You made my life worth living." "You saved me," Natalie said softly. "When I wrote that letter, I was desperate and afraid and alone. I never imagined that it would lead to this, to real love, to a family. You gave me everything I ever wanted but never thought I could have." "We gave it to each other," Vincent corrected. "That letter might have been meant for someone else, but it found its way to me, and I will be grateful for that every day for the rest of my life." They kissed, slow and sweet, the fire crackling beside them and their son sleeping peacefully nearby. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming winter, but inside the house there was only warmth and love and the promise of all the years to come. The years passed with the rhythm of ranch life, marked by seasons and harvests and the growth of their family. Victor was followed by a daughter, Elena, born 2 years later with her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. Then came another son, Thomas, sturdy and laughing and fearless. Each birth brought new joy, new challenges, new depths to the love that Vincent and Natalie shared. The ranch prospered under Vincent's careful management. He expanded the herd, bought additional land when it became available, built new outbuildings, and improved the house. Dutch grew older but stayed on, becoming a beloved uncle figure to the children, teaching them to ride and rope and all the skills they would need to run the ranch someday. Natalie thrived as a mother and a rancher's wife. She kept the household running with quiet efficiency, taught her children to read and write, and stood beside her husband through droughts and harsh winters and all the unpredictability of life on the frontier. She never heard from her father again, but sometimes she would stand on the porch at sunset, looking east, and Vincent knew she was thinking of him. "You think he is still alive?" she asked one evening when the children were in bed and they had a rare moment alone. "I do not know," Vincent said honestly, "but I know he made his choice just as you made yours, and your choice led to this." He gestured at the house, the land, the life they had built. "I think you chose well." "I know I did," Natalie said, leaning against him. "I would not change a single thing, even the hard parts. It all led me here to you, to our family. That makes it worth everything." When Victor was 12, Dutch died peacefully in his sleep, an old man who had lived a full life. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, and Vincent carved a simple headstone with his name and the words, "A faithful friend." Victor cried at the funeral, the first time he had experienced death, and Vincent held his son and let him grieve, knowing it was an important lesson about the preciousness of life. They hired a new foreman, a younger man named Sam, who proved capable and hardworking. Victor began taking on more responsibilities around the ranch, learning from his father, preparing for the day when the land would be his. Elena showed a talent for breeding horses, developing an intuitive understanding of the animals that impressed everyone. Thomas, the youngest, was still finding his way, but he had his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Vincent gave Natalie a necklace he had commissioned from a jeweler in Boise, a delicate silver chain with a pendant shaped like a letter. "Because a letter brought us together," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "and I want you to remember that every day. Natalie touched the pendant, her eyes bright with tears. "How could I ever forget? You are the answer to a prayer I did not even know how to pray. You are my home, my heart, my everything." They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies as well as they knew their own, bringing each other pleasure with practiced skill and genuine love. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Vincent thought about the journey that had brought them here. A misdirected letter, a case of mistaken identity, a woman's desperate gamble and a man's sense of honor. It should not have worked. By all logic, it should have ended in disaster. But instead, it had become the greatest love story either of them had ever known. "What are you thinking?" Natalie murmured, her hand tracing lazy circles on his chest. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest man alive," Vincent said, "and that I would ride to the end of the earth and back for you every single time." "Good thing you do not have to," Natalie said with a smile, "because I am right here, exactly where I belong." The children grew into young adults, each finding their own path while remaining connected to the land and the family that had shaped them. Victor married a schoolteacher from town, a smart, capable woman named Sarah who fit seamlessly into ranch life. They gave Vincent and Natalie their first grandchild, a grandson named after Vincent, and the cycle began anew. Elena married a neighboring rancher's son, combining their family's lands and creating one of the largest cattle operations in Idaho. She proved to be a shrewd businesswoman, negotiating deals and expanding their reach, making both families prosperous. Thomas surprised everyone by studying law, but he never strayed far from home. He set up a practice in Boise and became an advocate for ranchers' rights, using his legal skills to protect the way of life he loved. Vincent and Natalie grew old together, their hair turning silver, their faces marked by years of sun and wind and laughter. They still worked the ranch, though they leaned more heavily on Victor and the younger generation. They still made love, though less frequently, their passion mellowing into a deep physical comfort that was no less satisfying for its gentleness. On a spring morning in 1912, 30 years after that fateful letter had arrived, Vincent woke to find Natalie already up, standing by the window of their bedroom, looking out at the land they had built their life on. He got up and joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I am thinking about that first day when you walked into my hotel room and I thought you were someone you were not. I am thinking about how terrified I was that I had made a mistake, that I had built my hopes on a fantasy. And then I am thinking about how you became so much more than any fantasy, how you became real and solid and true. I am thinking about how I almost threw that letter away," Vincent admitted. "How I almost decided it was not my problem, not my concern. Thank God I listened to my heart instead of my head." "Thank God indeed," Natalie agreed. She turned in his arms to face him, her storm-gray eyes still beautiful despite the lines around them. "We have had a good life, you and I." "The best life," Vincent corrected, "and it is not over yet. We still have years ahead of us, more grandchildren to meet, more sunsets to watch together. More love to share," Natalie added and kissed him. They walked out onto the porch together, hand in hand, and watched the ranch come to life in the morning light. Victor was already up and working, visible in the distance checking the fences. One of the grandchildren ran past, chasing a dog, her laughter bright in the clear air. Smoke rose from the kitchen chimney where Elena was preparing breakfast for the family gathering they had planned. "You know," Natalie said thoughtfully, "I never told you what I was going to write in my next letter, the one I planned to send after that first one. I was going to tell you about a dream I had, where I saw us old and happy, surrounded by children and grandchildren, living on a ranch that felt like heaven on earth. I thought it was just a wishful fantasy. Dreams have a way of coming true if you are brave enough to chase them, Vincent said. You were brave enough to run from your father, brave enough to wait for a stranger, brave enough to accept a new life with a man who was not who you thought he was. That bravery created all of this. We created it together, Natalie insisted. Your courage matched mine, Vincent Kane. You could have turned me away, could have sent me back to my father, or left me in that hotel. But you chose to help me, and then you chose to love me. That makes you the bravest man I know. They stood together in the morning light, two people who had found each other through impossible circumstances, who had built a life and a love that had endured through 3 decades of joys and sorrows, triumphs and hardships. The ranch spread out before them, solid and real, a testament to their hard work and dedication. Their family moved through the buildings and fields, carrying on the legacy they had begun. I love you, Vincent said, the words as true and necessary as the first time he had spoken them. I love you, Natalie replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Inside the house, Alina called that breakfast was ready. The grandchildren began running toward the house, their voices high with excitement. Victor and Sarah came walking up from the barn, his arm around her shoulders, talking quietly together. The whole family gathering for a meal, for a celebration of nothing more than being together, being alive, being loved. Vincent and Natalie walked inside, still holding hands, ready to join their family, ready for whatever the day would bring. Behind them, the sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the land they had claimed and tamed and loved. The ranch would continue long after they were gone, passing to their children and their children's children, a living legacy of a love that began with a misdirected letter and grew into something extraordinary. Years later, when Victor sorted through his parents' belongings after they had both passed away peacefully in their sleep, within months of each other, he found that original letter carefully preserved in a wooden box, along with other treasures his mother had kept. He read it with tears in his eyes, understanding for the first time the full story of how his parents had met, how close they had come to never knowing each other at all. He showed it to his own children, and they marveled at the tale. It became family legend, the story of how a letter meant for someone else had created an entire family tree, how a rancher and a runaway woman had found love in the most unlikely circumstances. The ranch continued to prosper, generation after generation, and always the story was told. The story of Vincent Kane and Natalie Jensen, who had found each other through mystery and chance, who had chosen love over logic, courage over safety, who had built something lasting and true in the harsh beauty of the Idaho Territory, something that would echo through time long after they were gone. And somewhere in the great beyond, if such things exist, two souls held hands and smiled, knowing that their love had created ripples that would never fade, knowing that they had lived exactly the life they were meant to live together, forever, completely and perfectly in love. The letter remained in the family for generations, carefully preserved, a reminder that sometimes the wrong address leads to exactly the right destination, that sometimes mistakes are actually miracles in disguise, that sometimes the person you are meant to love finds you in the most unexpected ways. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy Vincent and Natalie left behind. Not just the land or the ranch or the wealth they had accumulated, but the proof that true love exists, that it can grow from the smallest seed into something that transforms not just 2 lives, but countless lives across countless years. Their story became the foundation that their descendants built their own love stories on, the example they looked to when times were hard, the hope they clung to when the world seemed dark. Because if Vincent and Natalie could find each other against such impossible odds, if they could build such a life from such a strange beginning, then anything was possible. Love was possible. Happiness was possible. Forever was possible. And that, in the end, was everything.